He sat at the kitchen table staring at 11 empty chairs. 11 party hats sitting on 11 paper plates with 11 and used forks beside 11 slices of untouched cake. His foster mother, Linda, kept checking her phone, kept glancing at the door, kept trying to smile like this wasn't breaking both their hearts. "Maybe they're just running late, sweetheart," she said for the 4th time, her voice cracking slightly. "Traffic, you know?" But 10-year-old Danny Martinez knew the truth. Nobody was coming. Nobody had ever come. Not to this birthday. Not to the last one. Not at any moment that mattered in his entire life. He'd been in 7 foster homes in 8 years, and he'd learned that kids like him, the ones nobody wanted to adopt, the ones with issues, the ones the system kept moving around, didn't get birthday parties that anyone actually showed up to. Then, at exactly 3:47 p.m., they heard it. A sound like distant thunder, growing louder, getting closer, until the windows started rattling and car alarms began going off up and down the street. Linda rushed to the window, and her hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God! Danny, come here. Come look at this." Danny Martinez had been in the foster system since he was 2 years old. His biological mother had been an addict who'd lost custody. His father was unknown, and his grandmother, the only family member who tried to take him, had died when Danny was 4. After that, it was a rotation of temporary homes. Some were okay, some were bad, none were permanent. Danny had learned early not to get attached to places, people, or possibilities. Everything was temporary. Everything ended. He'd landed with Linda and Frank Morrison 6 months ago. They were in their 50s, experienced foster parents who'd taken in dozens of kids over 20 years. Their own children were grown and gone, and they dedicated their lives to giving temporary homes to kids who needed them. Danny had been cautious at first. He always was. But Linda and Frank were different from other foster parents. They didn't treat fostering like a job or a charity case. They treated each kid like family, even knowing a placement might only last weeks or months. Linda baked. Frank coached Little League. They had family dinners every night, game nights on Fridays, and a rule that everyone in the house mattered equally, biological, foster, or somewhere in between. For the first time in his 8 years in the system, Danny had started to feel something dangerous. Hope. Hope that maybe this placement would last. Hope that maybe, just maybe, Linda and Frank might want to adopt him. He'd overheard them talking about it one night. "I think Danny might be our last placement," Linda had said. "The one we keep." Frank had agreed. "He fits here. Feels right." Danny had gone to bed that night imagining what it would be like to have a forever family, to stop being the foster kid, to have parents who were actually his parents. Then, 2 weeks before his 10th birthday, the caseworker had delivered crushing news. There was a distant relative, a second cousin Danny had never met, who was interested in taking him. The system prioritized blood relatives, even distant ones. The Morrisons' adoption petition would likely be denied. Danny had taken the news silently, the way he took everything. He'd learned young that crying didn't change anything, that getting upset only made adults uncomfortable, that the safest thing to do was feel nothing and expect nothing. But Linda had cried. She'd actually cried right there in front of the caseworker, holding Danny and saying, "This isn't fair. He belongs here. He's ours." The caseworker had been sympathetic, but firm. "The hearing is in 2 months. Until then, Danny stays with you. After that," she'd shrugged helplessly. The system had rules, and rules didn't care about what felt right. That's when Linda had decided to throw Danny the birthday party he deserved. "You're turning 10, she'd said. "That's a big deal. Double digits. We're doing this right." She'd asked Danny to invite kids from school. He'd given her a list of 11 names, the kids who sat near him in class, who were polite to him, who seemed nice even if they weren't exactly friends. Linda had sent out invitations 2 weeks in advance. Colorful cards with dinosaurs on them. Danny loved dinosaurs, saying, "You're invited to Danny's 10th birthday party," with a date, time, dress, and pizza, cake, and fun, written in cheerful letters. Out of 11 invitations, they'd received 0 RSVPs. Not one yes, not one no, just silence. Linda had called some of the parents to confirm. The responses had been polite, but devastating. "Oh, we have a family thing that day. My son has a soccer game. We're going out of town." Every single one an excuse that might have been true, but felt like a gentle rejection. One mother had been more honest than the others. "Look, I'm sorry, but my daughter doesn't really know Danny very well. And we heard he's, a foster kid with behavioral issues. I don't think it's a good fit." Behavioral issues. Danny had punched a kid once, a kid who'd been bullying him for weeks, calling him orphan and nobody's kid. The school had suspended him for 3 days. Now he had a reputation. Never mind that he was a good student, polite, helpful, quiet. One fight had labeled him as a problem, and that label stuck. So now it was 3:30 p.m. on Danny's 10th birthday, and the party scheduled for 3 o'clock was playing out in an empty room. Linda had made pizza, baked an elaborate dinosaur cake, set up games, hung streamers and balloons. Frank had rented a projector to show movies in the backyard, all of it for a party nobody was attending. Danny sat at the head of the table, wearing a paper crown Linda had made him, staring at the empty chairs. He wasn't crying. He'd learned not to cry about things like this, but the disappointment sat heavy in his chest, making it hard to breathe. "Maybe they're just running late," Linda said again, but her voice had no conviction left. Frank stood in the doorway, looking like he wanted to hit something. He'd taken the day off work for this. He'd been so excited to give Danny a real birthday, a memory that would matter. "I'm sorry, kiddo," Frank said quietly. I really thought some of them would show." Danny shrugged, trying to look like it didn't matter. "It's okay. I didn't really expect anyone." "That's not okay," Linda said, her voice suddenly fierce. "You deserve friends. You deserve people who show up for you. This isn't your fault, Danny. You hear me? This is not your fault." Danny nodded, not believing her, but appreciating the effort. That's when they heard it. At exactly 3:47 p.m., a sound in the distance, low and rumbling, like thunder on a clear day. It grew louder, closer, more distinct. Not thunder. Engines. Lots of engines. Linda rushed to the front window. What on earth? The sound was deafening now, shaking the windows, setting off car alarms. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, looking around in confusion and alarm. "Oh my God," Linda whispered. "Danny, come here. Come look at this." Danny slid off his chair and walked to the window. What he saw made his mouth fall open. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No, more than dozens. They were coming down the quiet suburban street in formation, filling the entire road, their engines roaring in unison. Harleys, Yamahas, Indians, cruisers, and choppers. More bikes than Danny had ever seen in one place. And they were all stopping in front of his house. The bikers parked along both sides of the street, in driveways, on lawns. They kept coming more and more, until the entire block was filled with motorcycles and leather-vested riders climbing off their bikes. Frank had joined them at the window. What in the world? Linda suddenly gasped. Oh, I forgot. I completely forgot." "Forgot what?" Frank asked. Linda pulled out her phone, scrolling frantically. "Last week, I was so upset about the party. I posted in one of those community support groups I'm part of. Just venting, about how Danny's classmates weren't coming to his birthday. About how unfair it was that this sweet kid was going to spend his 10th birthday alone." She showed Frank the post. It had been shared 847 times. And the comments: "Will come. Where is this? We'll be there. My chapter will ride for this kid. Count us in. Nobody should be alone on their birthday. This kid needs to know he matters." Comment after comment from motorcycle clubs, riding groups, and individual bikers across the state. Someone had created an event page. Someone else had made a route map. Within a week, what started as one frustrated foster mom venting on Facebook had become a coordinated mission to make sure Danny Martinez knew he wasn't forgotten. And now they were here. Over 100 bikers, with more still arriving. The doorbell rang. Frank opened it to find a massive man with a gray beard and a leather vest that said Steel Riders MC President across the back. His name patch read Toro. Is this where Danny's party is? Toro asked, his gruff voice somehow gentle. Frank nodded, speechless. Good. We're here for the birthday boy. Toro turned and called back to crowd. He's here. Let's do this. The response was immediate. Bikers started pulling things off their motorcycles. Presents, bags of them, wrapped boxes, gift bags, some neat, and some clearly wrapped by men who didn't wrap presents often. They piled them on the front lawn, a mountain of gifts growing by the second. Danny stood in the doorway, frozen. His brain couldn't process what he was seeing. A woman with silver hair and a leather vest approached him. Her patch read Tina. She knelt down at Danny's eye level. Happy birthday, sweetheart. We heard you were having a party, and we want to come. Is that okay? Danny nodded, still unable to speak. How old are you today? T10. Danny managed to whisper. 10. That's a big one. Double digits. She smiled warmly. My name's Tina. What's yours? Danny. It's very nice to meet you, Danny. We brought some friends. Hope that's okay. Friends. Danny looked out at the crowd of bikers filling his street. There had to be more than 100 now, maybe closer to 200, all of them here for him. Toro approached. Danny, my man, happy birthday. He held out his hand for a formal handshake. Danny shook it, feeling tiny next to this mountain of a man. We heard you like dinosaurs. That true? Danny nodded. Toro grinned. Good, because we got about 40 dinosaur-related gifts in that pile. Also some bike stuff, some video games, some books, and probably some stuff that makes no sense because we're just a bunch of bikers who don't know what 10-year-olds like. But we tried. A younger biker, maybe in his 30s, stepped forward. I'm Jackson. I've got a nephew about your age. He helped me pick out a gift. Hope you like Lego. Another biker, older with white in his beard. I'm Preacher. Brought you some books. Heard you're a good reader. They kept coming, introducing themselves one by one. Big Mike, Tiny, who was enormous, Razor, Ghost, Whiskey, document names that sounded tough, but voices that were gentle when they spoke to him. The women in the group, there were at least 20 of them, took over party coordination. They helped Linda bring out the pizza, set up serving stations, organize the chaos. Someone had brought a grill and was cooking burgers. Someone else had brought drinks. Someone had a sound system and started playing music. Within 20 minutes, Danny's birthday party had transformed from an empty room with 11 unused plates to a block party with 200 people. Neighbors who'd been watching nervously from their windows started emerging, curious. The bikers invited them to join. It's a birthday party. Everyone's welcome. Kids from the neighborhood. Kids who'd never spoken to Danny, who'd walked past him every day without seeing him, suddenly appeared, drawn by the spectacle. The bikers welcomed them all. More friends for the birthday boy. Toro found Danny standing by the gift mountain, still in shock. You okay, buddy? Danny looked up at him. Why? His voice was small. Why did you come? You don't even know me. Toro knelt down, his expression serious. Danny, can I tell you something? Most of us in this club, we know what it's like to be the kid nobody shows up for. We know what it's like to feel invisible, like you don't matter, like nobody cares if you exist or not. He paused, making sure Danny was listening. Some of us were foster kids. Some of us were poor kids, or kids with the wrong last name, or kids whose parents were addicts, or kids who just didn't fit in. We all know what it feels like to be alone. Toro's eyes were kind but intense. So, when we heard about a kid having a birthday party and nobody coming, every single one of us remembered that feeling. And we decided that you weren't going to feel that way. Not today. Not on your birthday. Danny felt something breaking open in his chest. I thought nobody cared. We care, Danny. All of us. You might not know us, but we're showing up for you anyway, because that's what family does. And today, you've got about 200 family members right here. That's when Danny started crying. Not quiet tears, but the kind of crying that's been held back for too long. That comes from somewhere deep and painful. All the loneliness, all the rejection, all the years of feeling like he didn't matter to anyone. It all came pouring out. Toro pulled him into a hug, this massive biker holding a tiny 10-year-old who'd been carrying way too much weight for way too long. "It's okay, buddy. Let it out. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to feel things." Linda peered beside them, tears streaming down her own face. Tina put an arm around her. "He's going to be okay," Tina said. "And so are you." When Danny finally calmed down, Toro kept his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Now, I believe there's a birthday cake in there with your name on it. And 200 people who want to sing to you. You ready?" Danny nodded. They gathered everyone, the bikers, the neighbors, the neighborhood kids, Linda and Frank, into the backyard. The crowd was so large people spilled into the side yards and onto the street. Someone brought out the dinosaur cake, 10 candles blazing. When they sang Happy Birthday, it wasn't just loud, it was overwhelming. 200 voices singing together, bikers with rough voices and soft hearts. Children who'd never met Danny but were now at his party. Neighbors who'd never noticed him before but were seeing him now. Danny stood in the center of it all, wearing his paper crown, surrounded by people who'd traveled from across the state just to make sure he didn't spend his 10th birthday alone. When he blew out the candles, everyone cheered like he'd just won the Super Bowl. "What did you wish for?" one of the neighborhood kids asked. Danny looked around at the crowd, at Linda crying happy tears, at Frank grinning proudly, at Toro giving him a thumbs up, at all these people who'd shown up when nobody else would. "I can't tell you," Danny said, "or it won't come true." But the truth was, his wish had already come true. He'd wished not be alone. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't. The party lasted hours. They played games, relay races, tug-of-war, water balloon fights. The bikers let kids sit on their motorcycles, showed them how engines worked, taught them about safety and respect and brotherhood. The gifts were overwhelming. Dinosaur toys, books, Lego sets, art supplies, clothes, a new bike. 3 different people had bought him bikes, gift cards, and a laptop one of the clubs had chipped in to buy. For school, they said, and for staying connected with us. Because they made it clear this wasn't just a one-time thing. They created a Facebook group called Danny's Extended Family with over 100 members already. They exchanged numbers with Linda and Frank. They promised to check in, to come to future birthdays, to be present in Danny's life going forward. Toro pulled Linda and Frank aside. "We heard about the custody situation, the relative who might take him." Linda's face fell. "Yes, the hearing is in 6 weeks. Have you got a good lawyer?" "We have a lawyer. I don't know if he's good enough." Toro nodded. "We've got a member who's a family law attorney. Real good. He works a lot of foster cases pro bono. Let me connect you. And if you need character witnesses, statements about Danny's well-being, letters of support, you've got about 100 people right here who will write them." Linda started crying again. "I don't know how to thank you. You already did. You opened your home to a kid who needed it. You loved him when nobody else would. That's everything." As the sun started setting, the bikers began preparing to leave. They lined up to say goodbye to Danny, each one giving him a hug, a high five, or a fist bump. "You call if you need anything, okay? Happy birthday, little brother. Stay strong, Danny. You matter. See you at next year's party." Jackson, the biker with a nephew, gave Danny his phone number. "Text me if you want to talk about Lego or video games or just anything. I'm serious. Anytime." Tina gave him a leather bracelet with a small steel plate engraved with the words, "You are not alone. You wear this," she said, "and you remember today. Remember that 200 people showed up for you. That's real. That matters." As the motorcycles started up one by one, the rumble building again, Danny stood in his front yard with Linda and Frank on either side of him, watching his unexpected family prepare to leave. They didn't leave all at once. They left in waves, small groups pulling out, revving their engines in farewell, some circling back to wave one more time. It took 30 minutes for all of them to depart, and the neighbors stood outside the entire time, watching the spectacle in awe. When the last bike disappeared and the street finally went quiet, Danny looked up at Linda. That was the best birthday ever. Linda hugged him tight. "You deserved it. You deserve all of it." Frank ruffled his hair. "Come on. Let's go inside and start figuring out where we're going to put all those presents. That night, Danny lay in bed surrounded by new toys and gifts, wearing his "You Are Not Alone" bracelet, thinking about the day that had transformed his understanding of what was possible. He'd started the day believing he was a kid nobody wanted, destined to move through life unnoticed and unloved. He'd ended it knowing that somewhere out there were people who care about kids like him, who showed up even when they didn't have to, who turned empty parties into celebrations. 6 weeks later, the custody hearing happened. Linda and Frank's attorney, Toro's friend, who was indeed excellent, presented a case for why Danny should stay with the Morrisons. They brought letters of support from teachers, neighbors, and over 80 members of various motorcycle clubs who'd met Danny once and considered him family. The distant relative who'd expressed interest withdrew her petition after learning how bonded Danny was with the Morrisons. "I didn't realize," she said. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but he clearly has a family already." 3 months after his 10th birthday, Danny Martinez was officially adopted by Linda and Frank Morrison. He finally got the forever family he'd been hoping for. At the adoption ceremony, the courtroom was packed, not just with Linda and Frank's family, but with bikers. Toro and Tina sat in the front row. Jackson was there. Preacher. Document dozens of others who become genuine parts of Danny's life. When the judge finalized the adoption, the bikers cheered so loud the bailiff had to ask them to quiet down. But they were smiling when they did it. 1 year later, Danny's 11th birthday party was held at the Steel Riders Clubhouse. It was a smaller affair. Only about 50 bikers this time, plus Danny's school friends, he had actual friends now, neighbors, and Linda and Frank's extended family. Danny had grown in that year, not just physically, but in confidence. He smiled more, talked more, trusted more. The permanent family, the community support, the knowledge that people actually cared about him. It had transformed him. During the party, Toro pulled Danny aside. "How you doing, little brother?" "Good. Really good." Danny grinned. "I got an A on my science project, and I joined the school robotics club. And I don't get in fights anymore because nobody calls me foster kid anymore. That's because you're not a foster kid. You're Danny Morrison. You're someone's son. You're our brother." Toro paused. "You know why we came to your party last year? You said because you knew what it was like to be alone. That's true, but there's more to it." Toro sat down so he was eye level with Danny. "We came because every kid deserves to know they matter, that they're worth showing up for, that they're not invisible." He pointed at the party happening around them. "Look at all these people here. Your family, your friends, your community. They're all here because you matter to them. That's not something we gave you, Danny. That's something that was always true. We just helped you see it." Danny thought about that. "I used to think I was nobody's kid, that I didn't belong anywhere. And now I know I belong everywhere. With Linda and Frank, with you guys, with my friends, with everyone who shows up." Toro smiled. "That's exactly right." 5 years later, 15-year-old Danny Morrison stood at a podium at a foster youth advocacy event, telling his story to a room full of social workers, potential foster parents, and teens currently in the system. "When I was 10 years old," he said, "I had a birthday party that nobody came to. I sat at a table with 11 empty chairs, and I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life." He paused, looking out at the audience. "Then at 3:47 p.m., I heard thunder, and when I looked out the window, I saw over 100 motorcycles pulling up to my house. Bikers from across the state. People who'd never met me, who owe me nothing, who showed up because someone had posted about a lonely foster kid on the internet. Those bikers taught me something important. They taught me that family isn't about biology. It's not about whether people are obligated to care about you. Family is about who shows up, who stands beside you, who says you matter, and then proves it with their actions." Danny held up his wrist, still wearing the leather bracelet Tina had given him 5 years ago. "I wear this every day. It says you are not alone, and I never forget it. Not just because of what happened that day, but because of what happened after. Some of those bikers are here tonight. Toro, Tina, Jackson, preacher. They didn't just show up once and disappear. They stayed. They became part of my life. They came to my school events, helped me with my Eagle Scout project, taught me to ride a motorcycle, and showed me what real commitment looks like. So to every foster kid in this room who feels invisible, who feels like nobody cares, who thinks they don't matter, you're wrong. You matter more than you know. And somewhere out there are people waiting to show up for you. Maybe they're bikers. Maybe they're foster parents. Maybe they're teachers or neighbors or complete strangers who see your story and decide to be part of your solution. Don't give up. Your people are coming. Sometimes they arrive on motorcycles. Sometimes they arrive in minivans. But they're coming. And when they show up, let them in. Let them care about you. Let them prove that you were never nobody's kid. You were everyone's kid. You were always worth showing up for. The room erupted in applause. Toro, sitting in the front row, wiped tears from his eyes. Linda and Frank held hands, proud beyond words. And around the room, foster youth who felt alone heard Danny's message and allowed themselves to hope. After the event, a teenage girl approached Danny. She looked about 13, with the same guarded expression Danny remembered wearing at that age. "That really happened?" she asked. "The bikers showing up?" Every word. "Want to see pictures?" Danny pulled out his phone and showed her photos from that day. The mountain of presents, the crowd of bikers, himself wearing his paper crown looking overwhelmed and happy. "I've been in foster care for 4 years," the girl said quietly. "I've had 3 placements. Nobody ever showed up for me like that." Danny looked at her seriously. "What's your name?" "Kayla." "Kayla, you want to know something? After my 10th birthday, I started volunteering with foster youth organizations. And I made friends with a lot of the bikers who showed up that day. And now when we hear about foster kids who need support, who need people to show up, we organize." He pulled out a card, Danny Morrison, foster youth advocate, with his email and the Steel Riders MC logo. "You email me your story. When's your birthday?" 3 months. "Then in 3 months, you're having a birthday party. And I promise you, people will show up." Kayla stared at the card. "Really? Really? That's what we do now. That's what happened to me got started. One lonely kid became 200 bikers showing up. Now we're organized. We've got a network. And we make sure no foster kid spends their birthday alone. Not if we can help it." Tears started rolling down Kayla's face. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll reach out. And promise me you won't give up. Because you're worth showing up for, Kayla. Whether you believe it yet or not." 10 years after that 10th birthday party, Danny Morrison graduated from college with a degree in social work. He'd specialized in foster care advocacy, working with the same system that had once shuffled in between 7 homes in 8 years. He'd also become an official member of the Steel Riders MC, a rare honor for someone so young, but earned through years of commitment to the club's values and mission. His thesis project had been about the impact of community support on foster youth outcomes. He'd studied 37 kids who'd received birthday interventions, organized parties attended by motorcycle clubs when no one else showed up. The results were striking. These kids had better school performance, fewer behavioral issues, higher rates of placement stability, and significantly better mental health outcomes. "It's simple," Danny explained to his thesis advisor. "When you show a kid that people care enough to show up, you fundamentally change their understanding of their own worth. You interrupt the narrative that they're unwanted, unimportant, invisible. You give them evidence that contradicts the lie loneliness tells." Danny's work caught attention. He was interviewed by news outlets, invited to speak at conferences, consulted by foster care agencies looking to improve outcomes. The Birthday Brigade, as the motorcycle community's foster youth support network had come to be known, expanded to 12 states. They'd thrown birthday parties for over 200 foster kids in 10 years. And every single one had changed a life. On Danny's 20th birthday, the celebration was back at the Steel Riders Clubhouse. 20 years old, a college graduate, on his way to a master's program in social work, with a job already lined up at a major foster care agency. Toro, now in his 60s with more gray than black in his beard, raised a glass. 20 years ago, We didn't know Danny Martinez existed. 10 years ago, we showed up to his party because Linda posted about a lonely kid. Today, Danny's changed the entire landscape of how we support foster youth in this state. He looked at Danny with pride. You took one day, one terrible, lonely, devastating day, and you turned it into a movement. You proved that showing up matters, that every kid is worth the effort, that none of us are nobody's kid. We're all somebody's kid. We're all worth fighting for. The room erupted in applause. Danny stood, overwhelmed, looking around at the people who become his family. Not just Linda and Frank, though they were front and center, but Toro, Tina, Jackson, Preacher, Doc, and dozens of others who'd been there that day 10 years ago and had stayed. I was going to give a speech, Danny said, his voice thick with emotion, but I think I'll just say this. Thank you for showing up 10 years ago, for one scared, lonely kid who thought he didn't matter. Thank you for proving that people still care, that community still exists, that showing up for each other is still possible in this world. You saved my life that day, not by doing something dramatic, but by doing something simple. You showed up, and because you showed up, I learned to show up for others. And now we're all showing up for kids who need it. That's the legacy of one birthday party. That's what happens when people care more about doing what's right than what's easy. He raised his own glass. So here's to showing up. Here's to empty chairs that get filled. Here's to lonely kids who discover they're not alone. Here's to families that choose you. And here's to birthdays that change everything. To showing up, everyone echoed. And in that moment, in a motorcycle clubhouse full of people who'd started as strangers and become family, Danny Martinez, formerly Danny the foster kid, Danny nobody's kid, Danny with no one to show up for him, understood completely that he'd always been exactly what Toro said, everyone's kid, worth showing up for, worth fighting for, worth every single mile those bikers had ridden 10 years ago. The rumble that had started outside his house at 3:47 p.m. on his 10th birthday hadn't just been engines. It had been the sound of hope arriving, of loneliness ending, of a life being fundamentally and forever changed. And it all started because someone showed up when nobody else would. If this story moved you, subscribe to The Healing Narrative for more true stories about showing up, about chosen family, and about how one act of kindness can ripple forward for years. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever been a person nobody showed up for, or if you've ever been the one who showed up when no one else did. Hit that like button if you believe every child deserves to know they matter, that foster kids are everyone's responsibility, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be present. Share this with someone who works with foster youth, who was a foster kid, or who needs to remember that showing up changes lives. Because Danny's story isn't unique in its loneliness. Too many kids sit at tables with empty chairs, but it can be unique in its ending. We can all be the rumble that changes everything. We can all show up, and when we do, we prove to one more kid that they were never nobody's child. They were always everyone's child, just waiting for their people to arrive.